everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullis Show. Today I have with me Kevin Snow. Now, Kevin is the founder and CEO of Time on Target, an Army veteran, an entrepreneur, a sales expert, and a serious technology geek. And we're going to try and work out how to connect all those dots. His expertise is helping businesses take their sales and marketing automation and processes to a higher level. His knowledge, skills, and understanding of communication and technology are getting the real results for the businesses he works with. Kevin knows how to integrate digital tech with your sales process in an authentic, professional way. He'll show you what's been missing in terms of ensuring an effective system of outreach and trust building. And we'll be touching on sales processes as well, because sales is basically an art and a science. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Thanks, Jeff. It's really awesome to be here today.
Now, I was reading the profile that you sent through to me, and one of your interests is jackrabbit wrestling. And I was a little bit disturbed by that. But what is jackrabbit wrestling? It's not you taking on a small furry animal and wringing its neck or anything, are you?
No, definitely not. So when I was in college back in the mid 90s, I wrestled for South Dakota State University in Brookings, South Dakota, and our mascot was a jackrabbit. Uh, so I now follow jackrabbit wrestling as one of my interests. So.
All right, cool. And you're also a staff officer in the US Army and been doing that for quite a long time. And uh, you've said that, and that's interesting in its own way. But it's essentially, I suppose, in common language, it's more reservist type of role, isn't it?
So yeah, technically we're considered the strategic reserve for the U.S. Army, but we do deploy on a regular basis. So normally in Minnesota we'll have at least one or two of our units deployed overseas, supporting one operation or another. I've been deployed to Iraq and Kuwait, and also got to spend a little time in Afghanistan at that same deployment. So.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, I got to visit all the really cool vacation spots.
Yeah.
So
what are the beaches like there in the resorts? They're good?
the I can tell you though, in Afghanistan the food was amazing. We had an Afghan restaurant on the base I was at for the month I was there. And I literally didn't go to the chow hall other than for breakfast, because I would go to their restaurant for dinner each night just because it was authentic Afghan food. It was just really good. So yeah, I would definitely recommend any of that type of food. But I'm kind of into the Middle Eastern, Indian, Pakistani style foods. So
yeah, some of the spices are pretty cool, aren't they?
yep. Yeah, it's a totally how, things that they do, like cinnamon they use with savory foods, and for us that is a sweet thing, and that's a dessert spice, but they throw it in with their meats and stuff, and it adds this really cool dimension. So it's really kind of fun to experience those different cultures, and what is just normal for them that we think is just exotic.
Yeah, okay. And it almost sounds like you could have gone down a foodie route and become a chef or something by the sounds of it.
I totally love cooking, and that is like one of my favorite hobbies. It's one of the ways I relax. I will make like this huge meal on the weekend that then feeds me during the week. So I love trying all the different things. My weekends, if I'm not working on stuff, will be watching the Food Network and watching people cook. So and learning new ways to do stuff. So yeah, I love the cooking. I don't know if I'd want to do it in a restaurant though, because that is a whole different level of pressure and stress and stuff. But yeah, I think it's really fun to explore, and it's a way for me to be creative that I don't normally get to do. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like your strategy of cook once, eat many times. That sounds like a big cook up on the weekend, and
Yep.
yeah, I like that strategy. It's very efficient.
Less dishes that I have to do every night, and all kinds of benefits. So
Cool. So let's get back to university days, and you weren't wrestling jackrabbits. You were the jackrabbit wrestling team, okay, and you basically wrestled against the coyotes. Got stuck on that one. Coyotes. So now you went to uni, and in stalking you and checking you out on LinkedIn, I noticed that you did agriculture and secondary ed, a Bachelor of Science.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am supposed to be a high school ag teacher and wrestling coach. That's what I went to school to be.
Right. So something happened on the ranch that stopped you doing that.
Yeah, I started interviewing for jobs and realized that teachers didn't get paid anything. And I was a single guy that knew he had school loans coming up that he was gonna have to pay for, and rent and all this stuff. And I got offered a job with Frontier Communications doing a hybrid sales role where I was supporting existing accounts and then doing upsells and add-on services and expanding our market share with those clients. That was going to pay me, the teaching gig that I got offered was $19,000 a year, US dollars a year. The sales gig had a base of 39 plus bonuses. So I'm like, I was a 23-year-old kid. I'm like, that's double. Plus, there's going to be more coming in. I can actually like buy something other than ramen to eat. So I jumped and I went into the technology world doing telecom sales and going through their training program and everything.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting because my background was I was a high school teacher for about 6 years. And guess what I did? A sales job side hustle at night about and I realized exactly what you said. You said, I'm getting paid diddly squat as a teacher. And I go, oh, why are all the teachers leaving? It's not rocket science.
It's stressful. They
It's
don't get
stressful.
a
Yeah,
ton of support, and they still have to pay bills
exactly.
and take care of their families. So yeah, it's a pretty obvious poor mixture of things to keep people around. So
Exactly. Yeah, well, I made more money in 2 nights selling than I did an entire week of being a teacher. So that was an aha moment for me. And then I leapt into technology sales as well. So almost a very similar background in one sense. So it's but totally get it. Been there, done that. So you got this aha moment, sales, and so you go, okay. So it was like this call, which is basically about I can make more money, I can have a better life. So you've been running time on target. So you've sort of had this call to go into sales, and it's not hard to make that decision. So what happened from there? Like you went to telecommunications sales. So what happened from there? And what'd you learn?
so that first job, I was horrible. I literally got fired in under a year.
Right.
I didn't have any idea about how to prioritize my work to support the selling and the customer support stuff. And it was just not a pleasant experience for the company or for me. So, I got let go probably about 10 months in, and which was okay. I wasn't overly, uh, crushed by that, but it allowed me to get into a new company that was launching in our market, and they had been launching in markets all over the United States. Nextel, they were the walkie-talkie phone guys, and that was really cool because I got to go through their training and I started out with them. But that was where I actually had my aha about how I needed to be selling products in a B2B market,
Right.
and that was where I ditched that whole pitch deck concept of, here's your 3-ring binder, and when you go in, you're going to flip through and you're going to talk about all these things, and when they ask questions, you'll flip through another page. I completely got rid of that, and I realized that based on my personality type, and I'm a high C on the disc profile, so I'm all about details and questions, and I'm a listener, and I want to know why things work and how things do what they do, and I want all that stuff. I could ask really good questions and get really cool answers from my prospects, and then be able to actually provide them a solution. So instead of coming in and trying to sell a company cell phones and say, hey, I can save you $50 a month on your cell phone bill, I could come in and say, hey, we can do this, and we can actually increase the number of jobs your drivers do on a daily basis. What would it mean if your driver each had one more drop off and pickup a day? What if you could decrease the miles your crews are driving by 20% a month? What would that mean for your business? So I made this huge shift from transactional sales, which is what pretty much all the old style sales trainers taught, It was, the Ben Franklin clothes and the takeaway clothes. And, if you buy by Friday, I can give you this free thing. And we shifted into the solution selling concept where I was really going in and doing a deep dive into my clients and really figuring out what was going on in their world, so that instead of just trying to pawn off a product to them, I was actually providing them a solution that made their world better.
Yep.
And that they were excited to be working with us for, and that they saw, wow, we can do more. And then continually working with them to, how do we do more for you? What else can we do? How do we leverage this technology to make your business even stronger, and to differentiate you from your competition? And that's really where I figured out that the sales thing is really kind of fun, and that I really enjoyed doing it, and I was good at it. But it took me failing, and losing a job, and then having to really look at how I was doing stuff, to figure that out.
Yeah. One point that you made, which I think is really important, and I'll highlight to our users, is that you discover the power of listening and questions rather than telling.
Yeah.
And that for me was, I had an aha moment. I did a 6-month course in communications, which is very much about being self-aware and also being aware of others. And the core skill in that is active listening. So, when you discovered, so you obviously started using questions more and listening to the customer and working out what their problems that they wanted you to help them solve by what your product delivered. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So, so you get this training, your whole sales strategy changes. You're going from pitch deck to a different type of sales approach. So that's sort of like your aha moment. You're in the industry, but now you're going, okay, this makes sense now. Is that right?
Yeah, it was for me, and I had to. And it took me a while to really comprehend what I was doing and how to do it. So, when I got rid of the pitch deck and started doing the questioning, I had to script out my questions. And I had figured out, all right, so there are different levels of questioning based on how intimate you're going to get with that answer. So at the beginning, it was really a lot of, all right, so how many locations do you have? How many employees? And, really, really basic stuff that if I researched on the internet, I could find, but I wanted them to, be answering so we could build that trust. And then working down through operational stuff to at the bottom where it's, the most guarded information was all the financial stuff, and the impact and quality of life questions about, what if this happened, if we were able to do this, what impact would that have on your business? And we're now getting into the stuff that you wouldn't normally ask someone on your first time you meet them.
Yeah.
But for me, that was really important, because being that detail person, I needed to be able to go through and understand how I was doing it, and learn how to ask the questions. And then I figured out, all right, so they're giving me answers out of orders. I can fill it in. Now I don't need to answer that question. And I could start now when I do client calls for time on target. We don't always necessarily start with those high level questions. I start with, hey, all right, so tell me your story. How did you get into this? And I go pull pieces out of that to now fill in my puzzle so that I could start putting stuff together.
Yep.
And that questioning skill was really important to learn, because that's what set the stage up for me to be able to do what I do now. The funny thing is, once I got to a point where I'd been doing that for a long time with Nextel, I thought I knew what all my clients wanted. So I was skipping it. I was jumping right into hey, I know all about your business already, and here's the thing. And that didn't work so well.
Right.
I had to reteach myself that even though I think I know the answers, I still have to ask all the questions.
Yeah.
I need to have that person verbalizing the things that are going on, and me saying, oh, wow, tell me about this. All right, so you said this, and does that mean this? And then we could having all that conversations, because it helped them move through the process as well. It wasn't just about me getting information. It was really about them understanding what was going on in their business, and the options that were out there, and the impacts of the status quo if they chose that route. So I had to reteach myself to go back. And even though I knew I was going into a construction company and I knew what their issue was going to be and what my solution was going to be, I had to go through the actions.
Yeah.
Because it was important for them. It wasn't just about me.
Yeah. And I think, as you were mentioning your process and how you went back to the basics again, in that active listening is not parroting back their answer, it's restating it in other words and get them to say, does that make sense, or is that what I'm hearing? And when I say absolutely, you know that you have heard them. Because as humans, we actually don't listen very well as on average.
No, definitely not.
And I think what you've mentioned you do is incredibly powerful. I've discovered that over the years, that if you can get them to explain to you and you then hear them and then you feed back to them that you have heard them, then they feel like they're actually proposing the answer as well. And they own it.
Yeah, and that was a huge part. If they tell me that if they don't make any changes, they're potentially going to lose their business because of X, that carries a completely different amount of weight than if I say, if you don't do this, you're going to lose your business.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, who are you telling me that I'm going to lose my business? Yeah. But, if they say it, then it's like, wow, really? You can lose your business? No way. And you can now empathize with them and build that relationship. Well, let's figure out how that doesn't happen. If I can show you how to do this so you don't have to worry about your business losing, should we keep talking? Yeah, let's keep talking. Perfect. Now I can come in and teach a solution that will get them all excited for them to say, all right, so how do we start? How do we get going? How do we start doing this?
Yeah.
And I've never had to do an actual closing move.
Right. Yeah, because it just sounds fake, doesn't it? Like all these closing moves.
And it never sounds right when I say it. There are people who can go through the Glengarry, Glen Ross type closes. I can't do those. They sound horrible. They sound like a really bad auto sales guy is saying when I try them. Yeah, it's so totally not my personality.
Yeah. And that's part of the process of learning too, is actually you got to work out what works for you.
Yep.
It's not one size fits all. So you're doing these sales jobs. When was the next step into time on target, where you started to, looks like you blended technology with sales and added process? When did that happen?
So I left Nextel and I actually started working at one of their independent distributors. So an authorized agent, started selling for them, started managing a sub-dealer network. So a bunch of the independents who were too small to work directly with Nextel got rolled up under us. So I was managing them and training, working a distribution channel, which was really interesting. It was a whole new thing I hadn't done before. So I got to really kind of start figuring out, all right, so how do I train these people to sell? How do I keep them motivated? How do I support them? And I learned a ton. But then during that period, I was getting really active in a networking organization. And I became a chapter president. And then I got on to the regional team, supporting chapters. And then eventually I became an area director, where I was actually launching groups. And I spent a few years where I was actually doing that full time. I was, launching groups, really good at it. And people around the world started knowing who I was and, and how my process worked. And they started asking me, hey, can you come in and train my team?
Right.
The region across the country. Hey, can you train my team how to launch chapters? They're like, yeah, totally. That'd be really cool. They're like, yeah, we'll fly you in. We'll put you up in a hotel. I'm like, sweet, awesome. And we'll give you money and we'll pay you. Oh, really? You're going to pay me too? I was just excited to go to Houston or Florida and not have to pay for the trip. I'm like, yeah, all right, sweet. So I actually started Time on Target because they wanted to pay me to train their team how to do stuff. There was no expectation that, everyone's like, oh, you started Time on Target with this cool idea. No, it was literally, I had to have a tax ID number so people could give me money to come speak. And so I kept doing the networking thing, but then I also started speaking at different conferences, chambers, organizations. Companies would hire me to come in and train sales and networking and all that stuff. And it was really fun. But then I deployed in, 16 years ago. So like in 2006, I got this wild hair as a 34-year-old, me and my best friend at the time, that we should enlist and join the Army. So we went off to basic training as 34-year-olds, and then went through commissioning and came back. And then I had to deploy in 2011. So I came back from that and I realized I had no speaking gigs and I had nothing in my pipeline. And I had that oh shit moment of now what do I do? And I had to figure out if am I going to restart and do speaking stuff again? Am I going to do a big pivot with the company? Am I going to go get a job? That one got thrown out really quickly. But we did a huge pivot with the business. I realized that I had really just created a really cool job, not something that was scalable into a business.
Yeah.
And I needed something that I could scale and have people doing things, because there was a high chance that I was going to end up having to deploy again. This was in 2012. So this is right after the surge. We literally just gotten out of Iraq. Afghanistan was still going on. There's all kinds of opportunities for more times for Kevin to go overseas. So I needed something different. So I restructured the company and we shifted from me being the product and me being on stage to that being a business development tool.
Yep.
And really focusing on going into emerging businesses, specifically tech firms, and helping them figure out, all right, so we've been growing, we've had success. How do we actually bring on a sales team now? So we can take that next big growth step. They've usually already had their first big growth spurt. They've hit their first plateau, and now they're trying to take that next step to spur more growth. So we'd come in and we'd teach them all the stuff. We teach them how to write a good sales job description, how to do the interviewing process. We'd help them design training. We'd map their sales process out. We teach them how to manage salespeople, because managing a salesperson is completely different than managing a software developer. So we teach them all that type of stuff. And by the end of the 6-month engagement, they'd have a sales team.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun. I was basically a sales manager for hire.
Right.
For a couple of years. And I discovered while I was doing it, while I was really enjoying it and having fun and making decent money, I discovered there are parts of it that I really absolutely hated. And I realized really quickly that they weren't scalable. So one of them was the interview process.
Yep.
So if you're going to hire 2 or 3 salespeople at a time, you're doing probably 40 initial interviews.
Yeah. That's
a lot of man hours to get through that in a week or two. So I realized I couldn't have other clients going through that stage at the same time. Yep. So we got rid of the hiring process piece.
Right.
And then I discovered, I didn't want to do the training stuff anymore, because training development is cool, but it wasn't what I really geeked out on. So we got rid of that. Then we got rid of the management piece, and we narrowed it down to where we were really focusing on just how do you sell? How do your buyers make decisions? And how do you make sure those two processes are lined up so they're flowing at the same rate and at the same point in time? And that was awesome. And then I had my next big aha moment with Time on Target. And it was the, oh, you're an idiot, Kevin moment. And that was when I realized that I was giving away thousands of dollars because I was bringing in other people to do the sales technology piece.
Yep.
I wanted to be that really good the really good consultant that would come in and say, let's figure out the best system for you. And then we'd look at multiple things and I'd recommend one, and, being completely agnostic. And I realized that's dumb. That's one, it's costing me money, but it's not actually serving my client.
No.
Because my job is to come in and tell them what they need, and to be able to say, you need this system because here's what it can do. And to be able to understand that system in and out and be able to take care of it for them. So I immediately brought on 2 or 3 email partners, 2 or 3 CRM partners, a couple other partners that did some of the auxiliary things for sales, like proposals and calendars, tools, and all that type of stuff, and added that in. So now not only did we do the process development and the process mapping, we would now figure out, all right, how do we integrate the tech in here? Yeah. How are we going to do email marketing for an outside sales process? How are you going to utilize your CRM? How is it configured? All that stuff. And now that's really our focus, is on how you integrate tech into your sales process. And that's what we do for the bulk of our clients.
And I did notice in the notes too that HubSpot is maybe your tool of choice to handle all of that.
I am HubSpot certified on a lot of their courses, and they are a really cool tool. The one I tend to use for most of my clients is a system called Entreport.
Yes.
And I use them because they have all the really cool features. They're way less expensive
Yeah, they are.
for a small business than HubSpot is, and they have this one really cool feature that is key if you're an outside sales team where you actually have someone talking to a client. They allow when I do an automation campaign, I can insert um, triggers from the sales team. So I can make a salesperson have to complete something before we send out an email or before something happens in that automation, which is key if you want to keep your automations running in sync with how a client is moving through a sales process.
Yep.
A lot of the systems like a MailChimp or Constant Contact are all time based. Wait 3 days, send an email. Wait 2 days, send an email, and that doesn't work, especially in a B2B sales situation where people are moving forward and back in the sales cycle all the time based on what information they're getting and how the market shifts. So having that behavioral piece where I could tie in the sales team is key. And when I saw that, I'm like, yep, this is my system of choice. And we've been running with that now for probably 7 years as our main partner.
Yeah. And that's, and for me too, the realizing you couldn't scale without, and realizing that technology could help you scale was a wake up moment for me. And that even happened with social media marketing. So,
Yeah.
and I remember I automated building my Twitter followers, and I was accused of being not loyal to the philosophy of social media, which is about humans connecting with humans. And I got given a hard time back in 2011 about automating Twitter to generate leads and followers. So, but guess what we do today? Everyone uses social media marketing and email marketing automation all the time. So,
Yeah, me and my business partner now, we play a game with our LinkedIn connections. Whenever someone sends us a connection, it's like, all right, is this a real person or is this a bot? And if I hit yes, how soon till they're pitching? So,
yeah,
that's the game now we play with social media. Instead of saying, oh, this like's a really cool connection, I can't wait to talk to them. It's like, oh, are they going to sell me or are they not going to sell me? And that's really kind of sad
yeah,
because it's kind of lost the meaning behind it, especially with something with like LinkedIn where it's really designed for business people to have really cool conversations.
exactly. So that raises another question about building trust and credibility. And where does content play in that piece for you?
Con- I think content is really key because uh, it is a signal for marketing and sales as to where a prospect is in their decision making process. It's an indicator on here's what we're doing or here's where we're trying to get to right now. But then it's also that piece that's going to free up time for your sales team if you have it automated and you understand that. All right, so we just finished the technical site visit for this IT cutover. We now need to send this specific piece of content
Yep.
to support the move into the next stage of the sales process. So you need to have mapped out really well what's going through your prospect's mind during their decision making and all what their different stages are,
Yeah.
so that you can then pull the content and say, all right, so at this point we need case studies because they're just trying to figure out if they actually have an issue that they need to spend time and effort on resolving. At the other end of the funnel, it's they need checklists to make sure that to reinforce that they're making the right choice and then they can feel confident in the decision they're about to make. So it's understanding those content needs, which is really going to set you apart from your competition, which will send out stuff, but then they're going to use it as a pitch as
Yep.
opposed to as an actual learning opportunity for the client.
Yeah. And it's, the numbers that are tossed around in the marketing industry and content marketing is that 60 to 70% of the customer journey is done before they even send you an email or pick up the phone.
Yep.
And the way that is done is they've checked out your website, they've maybe subscribed to your email list, they've got content, and that process is one of building a credibility and trust to a point where they're going, these guys are good at what they do. Um,
Yep.
let's engage them.
Yeah, and one of the key points in when you're mapping out a client's buyer journey is understanding where in that process they're actually ready to engage.
Yeah.
Because if someone downloads a case study, you're like, oh my God, they downloaded a case study, give it to sales. Hey, sales, go call this person. And they engage too quickly, you just annoy the client.
Yeah.
There is one system that has really great content, and I love reading their stuff because I always get really cool ideas when I'm trying to figure stuff out. So I'll go download stuff, or I'll read a blog, and within like 5 minutes, I'll get the email. Hey, I saw you're checking this blog out. Here's some other things you might want to read. I'm like, well, that's cool. I like that. But then 5 minutes later, I get a phone call
Right.
from the rep who's trying to get me to be a partner. And I'm like, I was just looking at stuff. I am not at the buying stage where I'm ready to talk to you.
Yep.
You need to re-examine your buyer journey. So, and that it turns them off, because now you're that slimy sales guy who's just trying to get a sale, trying to get a commission, as opposed to someone who's really understands how your clients are doing things and you want to support their process.
Yeah. The other thing that is tossed around all the time is the sales funnel is seen as this linear journey, and salespeople know that it's not. It's much messier than that. It's like a matrix.
Yeah. It used to be really linear. When I started sales back in the 90s, we would start at the top of the funnel and we'd get in front of someone and we would have to show them, hey, you have a problem. We would be the person who would convince them that, hey, you have a problem. Let's look at solutions, and then teach them about the solutions. And we would basically hold their hand through the entire process. Well, now there's so much, especially with larger companies, there's so many people influencing the decision. There's so much information out there. They may read something and say, oh my God, this is a horrible problem. We need to fix this now. Jump ahead to a next stage, and then get some input from somewhere else saying, hey, you need to slow down a bit. You're getting a little too fast with this process. We're not ready to make a decision. So now they go backwards again and they just start doing more research, or they see a news article that talks about something and now they're got the squirrel thing going on. Now they're looking over here, and it's you have to be able to track those and understand how people are moving so that you can adjust your sales process to match where they're at. Because if the client is at this point of the process and the salesperson wants to be here, and now they're trying to pull this person along with them, it screws up the experience for the client. It's going to be much harder to get them to say yes, and actually become a client if you're forcing them to move at a speed they're not ready to move at.
Right. So one of your big learnings in listening to is that you have discovered that sales is very process driven and can be enabled by technology. Can you tell us very simply what that process looks like, if that's possible?
Sure. So when we go in and we work with the client, we start with looking at the buyer process and then the sales process and making sure those are in sync. But then we start looking at, for the automation piece, trying to find the steps in the sales process that are labor intensive for the salesperson or are redundant. And, there's something that they have to do the exact same thing all the time for every client. And those are the first things that we're going to try and automate and move out of the salesperson's purview. Because automation, the number one goal for automation is to free up time for your sales team so that they can spend more time doing revenue generating activities and being face to face with the client. So first thing we're going to do is free up time so they can add to their pipeline. They can support more prospects in their funnel. And then we're going to start looking at the details for that process. So we're going to start looking at time that prospect sales spends in each sales cycle. And then we're also going to look at the percentage of clients that close when they reach a certain stage. So stage 3, there might be a 50% close rate, but at stage 4, it's an 80% close rate. So we're going to try and figure out what's causing people to drop out of the funnel at those stages, so that we can now make that 50% into a 60%. Is there a piece of content we can send that's going to get them to say, "Ooh, let's get to this point," and continue the conversation.
Yeah.
So that's really the two things we look at in order: is how do we free up time, then how do we collapse the cycle time and make it smaller.
Right. So, and salespeople are notoriously bad at detail. You're a bit of a different animal because you have that attention to detail and
Yep.
process. So, and that's a challenge, isn't it? In with salespeople, they love the human interaction. They tend to be a bit messier, and they like the fun of the conversation and engagement. And but they're usually bad at the detailed piece. So, what you're saying is you really use tech to help fill in the gaps that salespeople are traditionally bad at.
Yeah, it's really to, for me, we didn't have all this when I was doing the corporate sales thing at Nextel. So on Friday mornings, one of my tasks would be to look at all of my appointments from the few days prior, and then send out the email, hey, it was great to meet with you on Tuesday or Wednesday, and talk about your business and blah blah blah. Well, I would so not being paying attention to it because it was such a redundant task and repetitive, that I would cut and paste from my Word document into my email, and I would forget to change a name. So I would send Jeff an email that started off with, "Hey, Patty, it was great to meet you." And then I'd hit send, and I'm like, "Oh my God, what did I just do?" So automation is really designed to get rid of stuff like that. Those repetitive tasks that take up time, data entry, all the things that salespeople hate, and give them time to do the stuff that they want to do, which is the prospecting, the talking to clients, the engagement stuff, where they actually make money for the company.
Yeah. And that's what's good about tech is it can just like flying planes. Planes are much safer now because they're landed by computers.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realise that. I think the almost the only manual process a pilot does now is actually on takeoff because of bird strike. Um, so now you've had the aha moment about processes. What are some of the top things you've learnt as sales have become more technology rich and enabled? What are the top two or three things you'd recommend to people? And you're concentrating more on the B2B sales space, aren't you?
Yep.
What are the top two to three things that we could leave with our listeners that you think are really, really important that you've discovered in your 16 years?
Sure. So when the two big things that we work with all our clients on is when we're writing the content for the emails, that we always, and sometimes it's, like we have to force their marketing team to do this, but we need to have them written from the tone and voice of the salesperson.
Right.
So the marketing team has to understand how the sales team is actually talking about stuff and what phrases they're using when they're in front of the client. Marketing likes to use all the value propositions and all the marketing phrases they came up with that they've tested and that they really like. But as salespeople, we really don't ever use those when we're actually in front of the client. We found ways to communicate them that get the client to say, "Oh yeah, totally, I completely get that," and get them to be nodding along with us. And marketing needs to understand those types of phrasing so that they can use those in the email. One of my clients, and he's now my business partner, when we do automated emails for him, we would leave out commas because he was horrible at putting commas when he wrote. And I would usually leave like at least one misspelled word. And it would be funny because his grammar is atrocious, and he knows it. But
Right.
it would be funny because then I'd have marketing people who are on our list who would reach out to me. It's like, "You have a misspelled word." I'm like, "I know. It's this one. I did it on purpose." And there's also 3 commas missing. And it would just completely drive them nuts. But it sounded like Donnie. And we would have people who would hit reply on the emails because it sounded like him, and they would do stuff because they thought they were communicating with Donnie. And
Right.
that's the purpose of these emails, is to get them to engage. So if you're going to do sales automation, it's got to sound like it's coming from your salesperson or your sales team. And it has to be segmented out so that if I'm working with Jeff and Jeff's my sales guy trying to sell me stuff, the email I get says "from Jeff." And it's from at Jeff at, and it's his email address that it's getting sent from. So it looks like I'm getting it from my sales guy. And I'm not getting confused because why am I getting an email from Jackie? Who's this Jackie person?
Exactly.
So that is really key. It's got to be tone and voice for the salesperson. And then your automation tool has to be tracking your clients, your prospects' behavior. You need to be able to show, yeah, they're clicking on this stuff. They're clicking through this email. They're visiting these websites, because that is key information to share with your team. If I'm working with a client and I think we're still in kind of the needs analysis situation, and I get notified that, hey, they're checking out our pricing page.
Yep.
They're actually looking, and they've been at this plan page 3 times in the last week. That's really a big signal for me that they've jumped ahead and I need to reach out to them.
Yep.
So, that is really key. You need to be tracking that and have some sort of notification set up so that you can let the salesperson know, hey, number one client in your funnel visited these pages in the last week, and they visited this page 3 times. So this, this might be someone you want to talk to and reach out to and see what's going on. And then that allows them to have that authentic engagement with them and kind of have some visibility into what they're doing when they're not in front of them.
Yeah. So in other words, it's you're using the data to make informed decisions in terms of the sales process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So just wrapping up, Kevin, how do people contact you and the team? And is there any final tip you'd like to leave for our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so I actually have a gift for your visitors, and it's the easiest way to get into my world. If they text the words "sell smarter" to 1-612-429-4298, I will actually send them a guide that they can use that is filled with questions that they can ask their clients to figure out how their clients make purchasing decisions, as well as a chart that breaks out the different types of content based on sales stage. And that's a tool they can use to really figure out how they're selling and how it maps with their clients. And once they get that, they'll get a few other texts from me where they'll get invited into my sales automation group on Facebook, and they'll be invited to follow and listen to me on Growth Mode, our podcast. Okay. So then they'll have access. They can ask me all kinds of questions and pick my brain and get all kinds of automation ideas from me.
What we'll do is we'll maybe include that in the show notes at the beginning, and also so that people can actually copy text and put it in. So that'd be great. Thank you very much for that gift to our readers and viewers. Thank you very much, Kevin. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and great to hear your journey and discover those aha moments along the way. And that's what life's about. It's about learning, isn't it?
Yeah, it totally is. And thank you so much for having me on, Jeff. This has been a really cool conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Look forward to catching up maybe in the States someday.
I would love that.